House of Representatives. I see this. I think the
before 7, but since the room is up to capacity and the doors have been closed, we might as well start this meeting. It'll give us a little bit more time to have a discussion. I'd like to welcome you all to Wauwatosa, and I want to publicly thank the Wauwatosa Public Library for its cooperation in setting up this meeting, and also local law enforcement officials for their service this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to hear your concerns. In fact, this is the 81st public meeting I've held since January. You probably know that some of these meetings have become very contentious. So I want to be sure to review the rules that we need to adhere to so that we can have an orderly environment in which to exchange ideas. First, I ask you all to sign in with my staff. If you would like an opportunity to speak, you need to check the speaking box that appears in the sign-on slips. That way I'll know to call on you during the first part of this meeting. I will be giving priority to those of you who reside in Wauwatosa, and then if time permits, I will continue to call on residents of the 5th Congressional District. If additional time is available, I will call on those who do not reside in the 5th District. This portion of the meeting will last about an hour and 20 minutes. I expect participants to be respectful and to allow the person who is recognized and has the floor the opportunity to speak without interruptions, as well as when I respond to each comment. Further, if the question you would like to ask or the comment that you would like to make has already been made, please refrain from asking it again. We should try to hear from as many of you as we can within the time constraints. If at any time participants become rude or disruptive, I will immediately adjourn the meeting, as there is nothing positive to be gained from continuing with a meeting which is disorderly. We can all disagree without being disagreeable. Signs are okay in this room as long as they are not either disruptive or obstructive. The second part of the meeting is devoted to those of you who seek my help with personal problems they are experiencing with the federal government. The way I know you would like to speak to me privately about these matters if you indicate that on the very bottom of the sign-in slip. This part of the meeting is an opportunity for us to have one-on-one private conversation, and it is not the time to continue discussions from the general part of the meeting. Any filming or recording is prohibited during this part of the meeting. And the reason for that is a lot of this has to do with VA medical stuff, and that's private, and nobody should have that up on the internet that is to be used against them. So without any further ado, let me call up first in this meeting is Eugene Barufkin of West Wells Street, Potosi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I guess I was privileged, I could say, at a town hall meeting where you announced you were just became 65 or were becoming 65.
That was a while ago.
Me too. And you were going to be getting Social Security and Medicare. I'd like to know about your experience with Medicare and why you would think it would be bad for everybody to have Medicare. It seems to me that if we started expanding Medicare to like age 50, it would sure help a lot of people. We would not worry about the counties that don't have private policies available under ACA. As a former small business owner, I would have loved to have my employees 50 and over on Medicare because it would have lowered the insurance premiums and the coverage would have been better. So I'd like to know from you if you were experiencing any problems with Medicare, number one, and number two, why you don't think it would be good for everybody.
First of all, I'm not experiencing any problems on Medicare because I'm not on Medicare. I'm on Obamacare, which is required of all members of the Congress and congressional staff. My Obamacare policy stinks, and the reason it does is I have an $800 a month premium and a $15,000 deductible. That means that I have to spend about $15,000 out of pocket before the insurance pays a dime. Now, I can afford it, but most people can't. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why we need to repeal and replace Obamacare. Now, whether or not we should expand Social Security, Medicare, I think, you know, is another question. And the question is whether the Medicare system can afford that. The answer to that question, very clearly to my mind, is no. Medicare A is a closed-end fund. It is financed by a part of the Social Security payroll tax. Medicare B is funded out of general revenues, more or less like a welfare program is. Medicare C, which is Medicare Advantage, is funded about the same way, but private insurance companies operate it. Medicare D, which is prescription drugs, is also financed that way. Now, the projections for Medicare, have been that the Medicare A fund will be going broke sometime within the next decade. By expanding it, it's going to get broke earlier, and then all of a sudden, when it goes broke, then there's not going to be the money to pay the benefits that people have expected. People say raise the payroll tax. That's a job killer. And, you know, we've got an unemployment problem, particularly, you know, with disadvantaged youth. Just look a few miles to the east of here. We ought to be putting people on payroll so that they pay taxes, including the Social Security tax, rather than burdening business owners and the American public with more taxes. Here in Albers, North 107th Street.
I have a question also about the medical things. I'm just not understanding how things all fit together. Under ACA, I understand that some people get onto Medicaid who would not have been on Medicaid before.
Mm-hmm.
And with the new plan that the Republicans are proposing, I'm not sure, but is that phased out, or what is the before and after on that?
Well, the answer is no, and in fact, it's augmented. Both the Senate and the House Republican repeal and replace plans, increase the federal expenditure on Medicaid from $380 billion a year to $500 billion a year. That's an increase, by the way, anybody was taught math. And I think that there's been a lot of misrepresentation of what is happening to Medicaid. Now, if Medicaid kept on the way it's going, you know, without any kind of changes and targeting of Medicaid, it would go up, you know, another $150 to $200 billion a year. We've got a debt problem in this country. We've got a $20 trillion national debt. If people will not lend money to the federal government because they think they're never going to get repaid, you know, then the only way these bills get paid is by the Fed running the printing press. And that's going to be inflationary, and inflation is something that particularly hits the middle class and people on fixed incomes, like it did 35 years ago when we had double-digit inflation. And I would say that fortunately the Fed and the Treasury and the Congress and all of the presidents since then, you know, have put a lid on inflation so that it is manageable. We can't afford to have that lid come off, particularly in paying interest on a $20 trillion debt. Because if that goes up by 2 or 3 or 4%, you know, we're going to be spending hundreds of billions of dollars over the period of time, you know, and paying interest on the debt, which doesn't educate anybody, doesn't make any sick person any better, and it's going to further increase the inflationary spiral. Now, the other thing I want to say about not reforming Medicaid, you know, is that you know, if we don't reform Medicaid, you know, we are going to see this country go bankrupt. And I'm saying that, you know, just completely, and people started saying that when Bill Clinton was the President of the United States. He said that too, good Democrat that he is. And I have a problem on whether it's good economics or the right thing to do to borrow money, to spend money on ourselves, and then send the bill with interest to our children and grandchildren. That's bad economics. It's bad politics. It only weakens the fabric of the United States of America. And I would submit to you that it probably is not moral to spend money on ourselves and let our children and grandchildren end up paying for it. Amy White of Blanchard Street, Tosa.
Hello. Hi, Representative Sensenbrenner. I'll try to speak up. Thank you for holding these town hall meetings. I appreciate it. I've come to many over the last few months, and this is my first opportunity to say something. So. I first met you about 20 years ago. I went to Lawrence University, and I think that's your wife's alma mater. And I received a scholarship my senior year, and so I really appreciated that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I've been in healthcare, or involved in healthcare, both personally and professionally for a long time. So when I was at Lawrence, my mother had brain cancer, my father had lung cancer, and I was first power of attorney for one and then guardian over the other, and they both passed away during that time. And I went into medical genetics after getting a master's degree at UW-Madison. I know you also support higher ed throughout the state, and I appreciate that as well. So I had the fortunate chance to work in healthcare after getting my degree here at Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. I worked in healthcare for 12 and a half years with children and adults with genetic disorders. And that really gave me great experience in seeing how it works, like boots on the ground in the hospital. Working with all of those children and adults, you see that, of course, rare disease isn't well covered. It's difficult to deal with orphan diseases. The treatments are expensive. But I was there when the Affordable Care Act provisions went into effect. And I saw the difference it made. Parents didn't have to take out a second mortgage on their homes for their kids to continue to get treatment. Previously, I worked with adults with genetic disorders who had to get health insurance through the high-risk pool. And I've heard people at some of your town halls say that it worked for them, but it didn't work well for the majority of individuals. It would take 2 years to appeal. If they got coverage, it was for treatment only, and it was not covering the actual lab tests or physician visits. So basically, it would be treating people in a vacuum with blinders on, not able to adjust treatment, just trying to keep them alive. And after the Affordable Care Act, they could enter the exchanges, and actually costs went down because they could be managed appropriately. So it was amazing to see these kids with problems become adults, continue to have their insurance, continue to have treatment. Parents could actually switch jobs because their insurance wasn't tied to their current place of employment, and oftentimes they did better because they could finally switch where they were employed. So there were all these wonderful, and I also